Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really heady but crucial question about World War II.
We are. We're looking at how the Nazis' early military victories might have, well, paved the way for the Holocaust.
Exactly. We've got information that seems to connect those initial stages of the war, those quick wins, with the horrific events that followed.
Yeah, it's not a simple timeline. It's about how one thing created the conditions for another.
So our mission, I guess, in this deep dive is to really unpack that connection. Go beyond just dates and battles to see how military success fed into the unfolding tragedy.
It's a disturbing link where, military dominance meant this absolutely terrible ideology. To really get into it, maybe we should quickly define some key terms and moments first.
Good idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like when we talk about the early Nazi war effort, you always hear Blitzkrieg.
Mm-hmm.
That's lightning war, right? German for it. It wasn't slow, steady fighting. It was like super fast attacks, tanks, planes, all hitting hard and fast together.
Right, designed to overwhelm the enemy quickly, like a knockout punch almost, before they could really react. And it worked devastatingly well at first.
Totally. And speaking of things that didn't work against it, the Maginot Line,
Yes, the Maginot Line. France built this massive line of fortifications, really strong defenses along their border with Germany.
like a giant wall, basically. They put a lot of faith in it,
They really did. But the blitzkrieg tactics, particularly through the Ardennes forest, well, they largely just bypassed it, went around the strongest parts.
which was a huge shock, wasn't it? And that led pretty directly to the situation at Dunkirk.
It did. You had hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers, British, French, pushed back and trapped on the beaches there.
Just cornered by the German advance. Looked like a total disaster.
It almost was. But then came that incredible evacuation, Operation Dynamo. All those boats, big warships down to tiny fishing boats and pleasure craft.
Crossing the channel to rescue them. Amazing story, but also showed just how fast the Germans had moved.
Definitely. And after France fell, you get the establishment of Vichy France.
Right, so this wasn't the part of France the Germans directly occupied, at least not initially.
Correct. It was the southern part, technically unoccupied, with its own government based in the town of Vichy. But it was essentially a collaborationist regime.
Meaning they cooperated with the Nazis.
Yes, very much so. They implemented anti-Jewish laws, helped round people up. It was like a puppet government in many ways.
Okay. And standing against all this over in Britain was Winston Churchill.
Churchill became prime minister right as things were getting really bad in 1940.
He's often pictured as this really determined leader, right, rallying the British people.
Absolutely. His speeches, his refusal to consider surrender, even when Britain stood virtually alone for a time, he was crucial. A very strong wartime leader.
And his leadership was tested almost immediately with the Battle of Britain.
This was the air war. Summer and fall of 1940, the German Luftwaffe trying to gain air superiority over Britain to prepare for an invasion.
Like a massive dogfight in the sky, basically.
Pretty much. Huge aerial battles. The Royal Air Force fought back fiercely, and ultimately, Germany couldn't achieve its goal. Britain remained undefeated.
And a big part of that defense was radar, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely critical. This new technology allowed the British to detect incoming German aircraft much earlier.
Like electronic eyes seeing planes far away
Oh,
gave them time to scramble their fighters.
exactly. It was a major technological advantage for the RAF.
Okay, so while that's happening over Britain, elsewhere, you've got figures like General Erwin Rommel.
Right. The Desert Fox, a really famous German general known for his tactical skill in the North African campaign.
Leading the Africa Corps. Those desert battles drew a lot of attention, didn't they?
They did, a whole different theater of war, but significant. It tied up Allied resources for quite some time.
Then, shifting focus east, there was the huge invasion of the Soviet Union Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah, June 1941, a massive surprise attack by Germany against their former ally, the Soviet Union.
Just a colossal invasion, opening up this enormous eastern front.
An absolutely vast front. And this is where things take an even darker turn regarding the treatment of Jewish people.
This is where ghettos become more widespread.
Precisely. As the Nazis conquered huge areas, especially in Poland and later the Soviet Union, they started forcing Jewish people into specific walled-off sections of cities.
Confining them in these terrible, overcrowded conditions.
Horrific conditions. Cut off, starved, rampant disease. It was about isolation, control, and dehumanization.
A step toward something even worse. The final solution.
Yes, this is the Nazi term for their deliberate, planned, systematic genocide of the Jewish people of Europe.
Just the complete annihilation of an entire people. It's almost impossible to comprehend the scale of that evil.
It truly is. And the primary tools for carrying out this genocide were the concentration camps and later dedicated extermination camps.
These weren't just prisons, were they?
No, not at all. They started as places for political prisoners, but evolved into sites of forced labor, starvation, torture, medical experiments, and mass murder. Places like Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, they were death factories.
And the sum total of all this persecution, the ghettos, the shootings, the camps, that's what we refer to as the Holocaust.
Yes. The state-sponsored, systematic persecution and murder of around 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. An unparalleled act of genocide.
Okay, so with those definitions clearer now, let's connect the dots.
Uh-huh.
How did those early victories actually help enable this horror?
Well, the sheer speed and success of Blitzkrieg was foundational. Conquering Poland so quickly, then Denmark, Norway, the Low Countries, France.
Right, all in a very short span of time.
Exactly. This rapid conquest put millions, literally millions of Jewish people directly under Nazi control almost overnight.
So the victories provided the physical access, the control over the population.
Precisely. They gained control over the territory where these large Jewish populations lived. Without conquering Poland and parts of Western Europe, the scale of what they later did would have been, well, geographically impossible in the same way. It gave them the arena, so to speak.
That makes sense. And you mentioned the control led directly to the creation of ghettos, especially in Poland.
Oh, yeah.
Was that a conscious strategy, do we think, to sort of soften people up for worse things later by isolating and dehumanizing them first?
It absolutely seems that way. Forcing people into ghettos wasn't just about control. It was a crucial step in stripping away their humanity in the eyes of others, and maybe even in their own eyes under such duress.
Making them seem like the other.
Yes, separating them physically, making them live in squalor, blaming them for disease. It created a psychological distance. It made it easier, tragically, for both perpetrators and bystanders to accept, or at least not resist, the escalating persecution. It was incremental.
A chilling thought. And it wasn't just the land they directly controlled, right? You mentioned Vichy France. The fall of France created these regimes that helped the Nazis.
Exactly. The quick military defeat of France didn't just mean occupation. It led to a French government actively collaborating with Nazi anti-Jewish policies.
So Vichy rounded up Jews, even French citizens.
Yes, they enacted their own anti-Jewish statutes, sometimes even harsher than in the occupied zone initially, and participated in deportations to the death camps. This collaboration significantly widened the net of the Holocaust.
That's deeply disturbing. Meanwhile, Britain is fighting for its life in the Battle of Britain. They win, which is huge. But does that focus on their own defense maybe mean they couldn't really intervene on the continent early on?
That's a really important point. Britain's survival was paramount, and Churchill rallied them for that fight. Developing radar was key to winning it. But yes, fighting for their own existence meant their ability to project power onto the continent and stop what was happening to the Jews was severely limited in those early years.
They were busy just surviving.
Understandably so. But the consequence was that the Nazis had a relatively free hand on the continent for a crucial period while Britain was defending itself, and later, while the U.S. was still neutral.
And then comes Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah.
The invasion of the Soviet Union. You said this was another major escalation.
A massive one. While it eventually bled the German army dry, the initial invasion was, again, rapid and deep. It brought millions more Jews in places like Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltics under Nazi control.
Expanding the scope again.
Hugely. And this is where we see the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing squads, deployed on a massive scale right behind the front lines. They started mass shootings of Jewish men, women, and children almost immediately. Barbarossa really marked the shift to outright systematic mass murder in the East.
So the invasion itself was a vehicle for intensifying the genocide.
Directly, yeah.
It makes you wonder, too, about things like Rommel in North Africa. Important battles, sure, but did fighting there maybe pull Allied resources and focus away from Europe, giving the Nazis, I don't know, more breathing room?
It's certainly arguable. World War II was a global conflict. The Allies had to fight on multiple fronts: Europe, Africa, the Pacific. Resources, shipping, troops, attention, they were all stretched.
So it's plausible that the need to fight Rommel meant fewer resources immediately available to challenge Nazi actions in, say, Poland or France.
It's plausible, yes. While maybe not a primary cause, the dispersal of Allied effort across the globe likely meant less concentrated pressure could be applied against the Nazi core in Europe early on, which could have inadvertently allowed the persecution to proceed with less interference.
Okay, so there's the territory, the collaboration, the initial lack of Allied intervention. But what about the psychological impact on the Nazis themselves? Did winning so much so fast make them feel invincible, like they could do anything?
I think that's absolutely crucial. Those stunning early victories, Poland, France collapsing in weeks, must have seemed like proof of their ideology, of their supposed racial superiority.
A confirmation bias almost.
Exactly. It likely bred immense arrogance and a sense of impunity. If they could defeat the great armies of Europe so easily, who could stop them from doing whatever they wanted to the people they deemed inferior? It emboldened them.
So each victory sort of lowered the bar for the next atrocity, made the unthinkable seem possible, then doable.
It seems very likely. It reinforced their worldview and probably contributed significantly to the radicalization process that led from discrimination to ghettos to mass shootings and finally to the industrialized murder of the final solution and the concentration camps. Success bred confidence, and that confidence was used for horrific ends.
So if we pull it all together, those early Nazi military successes were far more than just battlefield wins. They were critical building blocks for the Holocaust.
Absolutely fundamental.
They gave the Nazis the physical control over millions of Jews, the territory to operate in. They enabled the creation of ghettos to isolate and dehumanize. They led to collaborationist regimes like Vichy, extending the persecution, and the initial focus of the Allies on their own defense. Plus, the sheer scale of the war, like in North Africa, meant less immediate interference. And then Barbarossa just blew the scale wide open again.
Right. And underpinning it all was that psychological boost, that sense of unchecked power and ideological validation that came from winning. It created the context, the momentum for the final solution to be planned and executed.
It really drives home how military victories, when wielded by such a hateful ideology, can create the perfect storm for the worst kinds of atrocities.
It's a deeply sobering connection. Power, ideology, and opportunity converging with catastrophic results.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about how unchecked power and early successes can be so dangerous.
Yeah.
What does this tell us about the need to confront aggressive ideologies before they gain that kind of momentum? And, the importance of holding power accountable even when it seems overwhelming.
Heavy questions, but vital ones.
Definitely something to reflect on. This has been a tough but necessary deep dive into a dark period. We hope exploring these connections encourages everyone to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep remembering the consequences of unchecked aggression.